I'm just an average guy who loves the outdoors. I love to hunt and I love to fish. Somewhere along the way I ended up with a video camera in my hand. So now I'm just cruising around checking out cool destinations. So sit back, put your feet up, and come on along. I'm Brian Whitens, and this is where I've been. We've all got that trip we're taking someday. Maybe it's a hunting trip out west or that fishing trip of a lifetime. Maybe it's the trip you've always wanted to take your son or your dad on. Regardless, we've all said it. Someday, I'm just going to do it. Well, when is someday? Someday never seems to be this year. It's always next year, or when I have the money, or when I have the time. All you really need to do is attach a date to it. And before you know it, someday will be today. For me, I've always wanted to visit the Rocky Mountains. So I did just that. I picked a date and I went. And there I met up with John Nelson of Gunnison Country Guide Service. John is quite the interesting guy. He turned his love for the mountains into the Gunnison Country Guide Service. On top of that, he's a nationally renowned cowboy poet. This episode started out as a Colorado elk hunting trip, but somewhere along the way, that changed. Maybe it was the mystique of the Rocky Mountains, or the trusty horses that made access to these remote areas possible, or John with his poetry and the enjoyment he got from doing what he loves day in and day out, year after year. Most of us experience this way of life for a few days or a week on that hunting trip of a lifetime, and a true experience it is. But after spending some time with John and his team of wranglers and camp hands, you realize in a hurry that for them it's much more. It's their way of life, the way they rely on and tend to their horses, the look in the wrangler's eyes when a bull elk answers his call, the emotion in John's voice when he's rattling off a poem about life, or the mountains, or mules. For me, this trip was a chance to have a look at their world, see what inspires them to do what they do. Yep, somewhere along the way, the course of this show changed, and it became not about the elk or the hunt, but about those who make the hunt possible. But even more than that, it made me think of all the people I know that keep telling me, someday I'm going to do it. Someday I'm going to take that trip I keep talking about. Someday.
I used to be a school teacher and coach there. In fact, head football coach at Gunnison High School at one time. But then used to sit out on that football field in the fall and look up at the colors and say, man, I need to be up in the mountains. And so I've made a lifetime career of it, basically. Started out the Gunnison Country Guide Service outfitting in 1978. So I've been into it 31 years. I guess love of horses and the outdoors and elk hunting and so on probably is what motivated me to do that. We offer a number of packages here at the Gunnison Country Guide Service. We do drop camps for our hunters where we provide all the necessary equipment, wall tents, wood burning stoves, cots, foam pads, all the cooking utensils, everything you need except for your sleeping bag in the way of camping gear. Pack these guys in and leave them, and they hunt on their own back in the wilderness, in the Fossil Ridge Wilderness where we're located. And then we check them about every other day, pack out game for them from wherever they have it down, then we'll come back in at the end of their stay and pack them back out. Then we also do guided hunts out of our base camp. On the guided hunts, we provide everything except your sleeping bag and personal gear and hunting license, of course. We ride every day out of here on horseback. We get up into the wilderness as well as what they call the recreation management area, and usually provide one guide for every 2 hunters. Some of the guys upgrade to one-on-one, one guide for each hunter. We also use spike camps in conjunction with our base camp, where on occasion we'll stay back in the wilderness country in one of our drop or spike camp setups. You don't need to be a great horseman to be able to ride. I mean, these horses are well broke and suited to this mountain country. They know their job and they're in good shape and good condition, and both horses and mules. I like riding mules whenever I get the opportunity. Well, the Skinner's set with worthy pride on his tall and trusty steed, a stout and shining specimen of the calico, long-eared breed. When a cowboy inquired smugly toward his mounted-up friend, "Where'd you get the jackass?" His laugh meant to offend. Well, the Skinner's face turned crimson, 14 shades of the color red. He looked like he'd sucked lemons as he sneered at the cowboy and said, Why, you old pot-licking sorry dog, you lame and blinded fool. If you had even a lick of brains, you'd have knowed this was a mule. Well, I know it is, said the cowboy. And if you was so doggone smart, you'd have knowed I was talking to the mule right from the very start. Well, the Skinner said, well, that's better. A jackass I just might be, but don't ever let me catch you abusing my mule's genealogy. Well, the moral of this short story is an ancient one, tried and true. You can cuss a Skinner or his mother, but don't ever insult his mule. Some good advice.
Watch Real Outdoors as they travel to a new and exciting destination each week. Real hunting and real fishing in the real outdoors.
We've all got somewhere we're going someday. For me, this was one of those places, the Rocky Mountains. I've flown over the Rockies several times. I was looking down and wondering what the terrain was like, what the scenery looked like from a view closer than 30,000 feet. I think it was when I first arrived at base camp that it finally set in. Someday had finally arrived. I was a couple of hours and 2,300 feet above the town of Gunnison, Colorado. 10,000 feet up in the Rocky Mountains at a base camp made up of a handful of wall tents surrounded by nothing but pristine wilderness. Just me and my backpack full of camera gear. No phones, no power, no hotels or cabins. No other people than those at camp. Just a handful of hunters, John and his crew, and a yard full of horses. In the time it takes to unpack your gear and chuck a piece of wood in the fire, your canvas shell transforms from a tent to your home. A wood stove, a lantern, and a cot. It's all you need. At the center of everything that happens at camp is the chow tent. It's where all the plans for the next day of hunting are made. It's where all the stories of the past day's hunting are shared. It's where you become friends with the rest of the camp. It's where your day starts and where it ends. It's morning. Just your face poking out of your warm sleeping bag, which is just enough to feel the brisk pre-dawn air. One of the camp hands pops in your tent and tosses a couple of hunks of wood in your stove. You stay wrapped up, listening to the crackle of the fire and watching its light show on the walls of your tent. But the smell of coffee and breakfast coming from the chow tent is overwhelming. The morning discussion is all about the day's hunt. What's the plan? Where are you going? And see you back here tonight. Hot coffee, a hearty breakfast, grab your lunch, saddle up and hit the trail. It's time to hunt. You place all of your confidence in your guide and your trusty horse as you head out into the darkness. Soon the sky begins to give off just enough light so that you can fully appreciate where you are. I know this part of the trip, quietly riding down a mountain trail on horseback on a clear, brisk morning through the awe-inspiring scenery of the Rocky Mountains, is a spot I will return to over and over again in my mind. Being in an area where elk are so abundant makes the ride all the more intense. But I was here to film, not to hunt. I was already wishing I had a rifle in my hand instead of a camera.
We're pretty lucky right now being here in this country. We're over 10,000 feet right here. And right now we're pretty nice and warm compared to what it can be. Sometimes here in November, the weather is pretty substantial. Of course, more weather we get, or the worse the weather gets, seems like the better the elk hunting is. We hunt mostly elk. Colorado, we've got 4 rifle seasons. From early October into about mid-November is when they end. But we also have some great mule deer hunting down here out of this camp we're in now. In fact, in the last 5 years, you have the opportunity hunting in the Gunnison country to have taken a pretty good a mule deer that make the record books. and we've got some good ones. It's some of the most pristine, beautiful scenery that that you'll ever see anywhere, and that I've ever been to. And I've been to, a lot of places. There's places that compare, but there's not many that are better and more beautiful in this country here in Colorado. Our wildlife in this part of the country, we've got mule deer, elk, black bears. You're lucky to see those, but we do have a pretty good number of them. Mountain lions, of course, and you rarely ever see those, but bighorn sheep and mountain goats, antelope even. People of all abilities, can enjoy a ride with us. Summertime, that's what we do, is we take rides back in the wilderness country, both in the West Elk Wilderness, as well as the Fossil Ridge Wilderness, and some of the other country around Gunnison, Colorado. And we go for fishing, or just sightseeing and riding.
It doesn't take long to figure out that pretty much everything that goes on around here revolves around, or at least involves, horses or mules. They are in great part what makes all of this possible. They shrink the distance from one point to another. They offer freedom. They'll take you up the mountain, across the mountain, and back to camp, safely, and I might add, enjoyably. It's how you get where you're going. It's the only way to get where you're going. You get the sense whether they're packing a pile of gear, a trophy elk, or you. They are more than happy to accept the task. They are your companion for a week. They force you to slow down and enjoy your surroundings. For those of us not so horse savvy, it's simple. Saddle up and turn it over to your sure-footed partner. He will get you there, and he will get you back. Real Outdoors is brought to you in part by Pine Sunset Lodge.
Watch Real Outdoors as they travel to a new and exciting destination each week. Real hunting and real fishing in the real outdoors.
It's time for a quick trip to North Country Legends Taxidermy, the official taxidermist of Real Outdoors, and some tips on what to do in the field when you shoot that trophy elk or that whitetail of a lifetime.
The biggest problem I run into as a taxidermist when someone wants to have their deer mounted is two factors. The first is they let the cape hang around too long and it gets spoiled. The second is I'm not left with enough cape to work with. I always tell people stay back of the rib cage if you're going to cut the hide off. It's not necessary even to cut it off. You can bring in the whole hide, that's never an issue. On the front legs, you want to leave enough front leg on there as well to cover the form. I normally tell people cut it off at the front knees, that's plenty of hide. When you're skinning your animal, as far as a whitetail goes, if you're able to hang it up, it's best to hang it by the hind legs and pull the hide down. Even on the front legs, if you can pull those legs off without making any cuts, that's all the better. If you do have to cut the animal, you want to start on the back of the knee and follow that line up. And then once you get into the armpit, then you can taper your cut back, basically to where you stopped your field dressing cut. Another very important thing to remember if you're going to have an animal mounted is to keep the cape cool and dry. And what that does is it prevents bacterial growth. Bacteria will cause the cape to spoil. The biggest thing is to get the animal cooled down as quickly as possible. The best thing to do is to skin it right away. You just want to keep it out of the sun and in the coolest place as possible. You can fold the cape loosely, skin side to skin side, and set the head on top, and that'll keep it cool. It's always best if you can freeze the hide. If not, keep it on ice in the cooler, just making sure that as the ice melts, that water is not able to come in contact with your cape.
Well, she asks why it is that I still do it, and expresses her concern and mounting fears. You know you're not getting any younger. You've been in this business all of 30 years. And as I sit at home alone this evening and stare out at the winter's wide expanse, I think about this lifestyle that I've chosen and wonder how and when I'll end this dance. But tonight, I hear a mule string braying from a trail where you can almost touch the sky. I feel the smile a building across my sleepy face. It's hard to face the future, but I try. I contemplate just how hard it is to make it. Make it? Hell, we're always lucky just getting by. Insurance, equipment, vet bills, livestock to be fed. Government paperwork could make a grown man cry. You know, it's hard finding good help these days, and you best be paying them darn well if you do. But you know, I wish I could pay them more. They earn it and love the life. They're just trying to make it too. And tonight, I hear those top hands laughing as we turn in at the end of a long, hard day. I throw the sticks of firewood out in my bed once again. The stress and the worry seems to melt away. There's a pain when I move wrong in my shoulder. They fixed my eye, but some things are barely seen. The wrecks have taken their toll on this old melon. It's been cut more than a pumpkin at Halloween. Horses and mules seem to be growing taller, and the uphill when I'm walking runs both ways. Takes a bit more grunting, but I still hold my own, though in my mind I know I've seen my better days. But tonight I hear a distant bull elk chuckle, and the passion that I feel I can't deny. It's one of those small things that I live for, like emotions felt when lonesome coyotes cry. Hell, I should listen to the good sense that she's making. I'm educated. I'd get a real job here in town. I work my 40 hours, that'd be just half a week. Perhaps time has come for me to start slowing down. I'd sell the business, these dang mules and horses, invest in something that has a way of paying back. Bring my life up to a standard for a new millennium. Let old ways and friends fall on through the crack. But tonight, I hear the mountains calling. In the canyon, there's an echo from afar, and that voice rings clear to explain my yearning. This way of life's not what you do, it's what you are. So perhaps it's best that I just sleep on this till morning, when my mind is running fully in all gears. Then treat thoughts of quitting like old Rip Van Winkle. Wake 'em up again and say, 20 years.
Watch Real Outdoors as they travel to a new and exciting destination each week. Real hunting and real fishing in the real outdoors.
Well, my trip to the Rockies to Gunnison Country Guide Service was coming to a close. Tom, one of the hunters in camp, did tag an elk while I was here. Of course, he shot it on the one day I stayed behind to film at camp. Yes, I missed the elk, but after spending a week here, that seems like such a small part of the experience. As those of you who have done it know, there is so much more to an elk hunting trip than shooting an elk. There are so many parts of this trip that I will remember for a long, long time. The smell of aspen in the fresh morning air as the night gives way to dawn. The sound of a bull elk answering a call. The guides and the camp hands. Hanging out in the chow tent listening to stories. Stories of other trips, other hunts, and the food. Great food. And the end of the day when the sun sets down and the shadows rise and the night fills the sky. You really do feel closer to the stars up here. Laying in bed, wrapped up in a warm sleeping bag, watching the fire flicker on the walls of the tent and listening to the sounds of the night. The sound of the bells. Horses roam free at night with a bell around their neck to make finding them easier if they roam off. I think I'll remember the sound of the bells as much as anything. And of course, John. It's worth the trip here just to listen to John put things into perspective through his poetry. And like I said, I was here to film, not to hunt. But after a week here filming, I know I'll be back. Next time with a rifle in my hand instead of a camera. Well, maybe a camera too, but I will be here to hunt. If you're like me and you've always said someday, yeah, someday I'm just gonna do it. Someday I'm gonna take that dream vacation. Someday I'm gonna pack up my fishing gear and head north. Or I'm heading for the mountains to hunt elk. Someday. Maybe it's time to put an actual date to someday. Maybe someday is this year. Call your buddies or get the family together and just do it. Set a date and make a plan. You surely won't regret having finally done it, but you will regret having not done it sooner. I don't think I've ever heard it put more perfectly than the way John puts it.
Some days come and some days go, but someday never gets here. Someday is just a dream away. Someday is always next year. Someday we'll all go fishing. I'm taking my family with me, heading to that Lunker Lake where the trophy's bound to be. Someday we'll raft the river or maybe paddle by canoe. We'll soak up fun and challenge. There's nothing we won't do. Someday I'm heading up north, or maybe I'll head west. Take my son on that dream hunt where hunting is the best. We'll go by boat, we'll go by plane, or maybe mule or horse. Somewhere where big game is big. In the wilderness, of course. Someday I'll win big in the lotto. And when my ship comes in, I'll find the time, I'll find the money. I'll be gone with the wind. Yet something says there's work to do and bills that must be paid. The time and money can't be found. They both must be made. So the time had come for action. Someday would soon be here. I'd go for broke, I'd make my move, I'd overcome my fear. So I called a man to set it up and confirm our coming date. He said, someday's been booked for years, that we were way too late. Seems that everyone's going someday, the most popular of days. He suggested I try firsts or seconds of Junes, Julys, or Mays. And when I cursed in great frustration, he sensed that I turned red, so he agreed to confirm a date for me, that someday I'd be dead. And on that day we'll all be together, my family and my friends. They'll toast the times that could have been and say their last amens. They'll say, oh, John was quite a guy. He knew how to set a goal. Then bury those dreams right with him inside a 6-foot hole. Because some days come, some days go, and someday is gonna get here. Someday, when your dreaming's done, someday there'll be no next year. So make the time and take the money and make your dreams come true. Because every day is someday, but the decisions are up to you.